You see the title on your screen. We're doing a college football playoff tier list. This is primarily just off of what they've done up to this point in the season. And just to get ahead of the curve, obviously, I know teams like Ohio State haven't really played anybody. I understand Iowa is pretty good, so I got to give them some credit, but I don't want to just base this off of my feelings in the preseason. This is solely based off what they've done in this exact season, which has been pretty crazy up to say the least. This is being recorded the day after the apple picking weekend. Everyone said this was a terrible slate of games. Then you had Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Then you had Texas A&M dominate Missouri. You had Tennessee lose to Arkansas. They're just a bunch of crazy games. I believe it was like 4 top 10 teams go down. So fully understand that this is going to go very south, but you're probably watching this on the Wednesday leading up till that October 12th slate of games. So we have a lot to talk about. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of teams we got to decipher through and try to decide who are going to be the 12 teams that I think should be in the college football playoff. With obviously you have the national title contenders, because I think there's a distinct difference between making the college football playoff and being an actual team that can win it all. Then you have the college football playoff contenders. These are the teams that I think are happy with making it, and I think they're more in the college football playoff race, more because they're in the conference title race, if that makes sense. And that's more to decipher between the outside the bubble and the college football playoff contenders. Is the outside the bubble are most likely the teams are going to be at the at-large bid, kind of decided by their resume. Whereas the college football playoff contenders are most likely the second place teams in their respective like Power 4 conference. Obviously, the group of 5, I don't think gets 2 teams in. And so I would probably put the group of 5 contenders in that second slot. Then we have the need a miracle. I think this is the primary spot of teams that just need a couple things to go their way, if like 2, 3, 4 things, and they would be right in the middle and the thick of things, and then they're not happening. This is just primarily a gut feeling of they may be in the race right now, but I just don't think this is the year that it happens. So like I said, we got a whole lot to get through. So with that being said, we're going to do a quick self promo. If it's your first time here at Rush the Field, you see everything on the screen. Leave a like, you bozo, because I just want to talk football with you. At the end of the day, that's all I'll ever ask of you. Whether it's a like, a comment, subscribe. We're so close to 1,000 subs. It was a goal that I set January 1 of 2024, and we're approaching 2025. And it would mean the world if you helped me out and we actually made some progress to this. I've been doing this since 2019, so thank you. If you want to give me an opportunity, if not, watch another video and give me another chance, because I'm going to get you somehow. At the end of the day, I'm going to get you to watch this and subscribe to this channel one day. So thank you so much for watching. Let's go ahead and dive in. First team up is Alabama. And even though they just lost to Vanderbilt, this is a team that I still think can match up with any of the national title contenders across the board. They were the number 1 team just last week. I think not for a fair reason, but they understandably just dominated Georgia in that first half, let up the gas, then got in a dogfight and still was able to win football games. I fully understand the Vanderbilt game is an ugly stain on their season. No way around it. That's just objectively what it is. But they're still a national title contender. I would find it a very difficult argument, especially knowing everyone else, for the most part, outside of Ohio State and Texas, both have like one bad look on their resume, especially even Oregon, who hasn't lost a game. They had the trouble with Idaho. They had trouble with Boise State. So it would be a very tough argument for me to not have Alabama in this race. Arkansas, it's just not happening. I think Arkansas is a better team than what their record says. They were in a dogfight with both of their losses. I think this is a team that was really close to 5-0, but with the context of the SEC, I wanted to shout them out because they did just beat Tennessee, but I feel like that's a one-off occasion than what the reality of this team is going to be for the rest of the year. Boise State, I think that they're right in that college football playoff contenders. We're going to find out really quickly. They play UNLV next week. I think that's what decides what group of 5 team between the two of them is most likely going to be the favorite to make it in the 12-team playoff. It also depends on a bunch of different things. You also have to win the conference as the group of 5 team, but it'd be hard-pressed to find a reason not to have Boise State in this contention, especially knowing Ashton Jeanty and the incredible run that he's on. There's a video that will be out about him and the record with Barry Sanders and the history behind it, just to kind of add some more weight to how crazy of a season he has just started. He just went off 186 yards, 3 touchdowns, so he's continuing that momentum. I hope we get more of that when they go and play UNLV. Now we have Colorado. I think they're right outside the bubble, which is shocking to me. I had Colorado going about 8 games, making a bowl game, first time in Deion's career. I think it would be a really impressive feat for them to get 8 games. But to be fair, in the Big 12, it's wide open. It objectively is a wide open conference. We don't know anything that could happen here. So they could be definitely a contender in this race, but I feel like with the buffer of a couple of the other Big 12 teams, I have them right outside the bubble. But I think that's still an accomplishment knowing for what Colorado is. They have Travis Hunter, who is arguably the Heisman frontrunner. Shedeur Sanders looks a lot better than he did last year, and he looked good last year. I just don't know if they have the depth on the other positions in that team to make the college football playoff. But the top 2 guys, and they're having some of their edge defenders, some of the transfers are definitely setting up to give them an opportunity. I just don't know if out of everyone in the Big 12, they're going to be the team that makes it. But to be fair, they get a big test against Kansas State this week. I'm fascinated by that. Clemson is a contender. I think you can argue they're the favorite in the ACC right there with Miami having back-to-back scary weeks. It'd be hard. I know I keep saying it'd be hard pressed to find a reason not to, but I think Clemson, a team that I was lower on, I've made jokes about ad nauseum. I think it's more of a sign that the ACC is just not that strong of a conference. But I got to give them credit. They have definitely bounced back. They had no real issues with Florida State with their change in Brock Glenn at quarterback. And then it just basically comes down to them in Miami and then potentially an SMU team that we'll talk about later in this video. Georgia, even with the loss to Bama, they're a national title contender. If they were to win the national title, would you truly be shocked? No. Iowa State, college football playoff contender at this point. They're the odds-on favorite to win the Big 12. That's what I mean, man. It is a wide open race. I was super, super high on Iowa State. Go look at my Big 12 video. I've been making videos about them. I think Rocco Beckton crew, and this is just a really well-coached team. They're in the contendership, and I think for the Big 12, there's about 3 or 4 teams, Colorado being one of them, that I think could end up winning this. But to be fair, if you just look at the odds, they think it's about 7 to 8 teams. So this conference is just absolutely wide open, and it'd be really difficult to try to pinpoint who's going to be the team that wins it. I liked Iowa State going into this year. I like what I see this year. I got to rock with them as an actual contender. Iowa, I think they need a miracle. They're just not good enough on the offense side of the ball. Caleb Johnson had an incredible start. It's just in the Big Ten, I think there's just better teams, and they're going to find a very difficult path. I'm not going to say it's not happening, but they could easily get a miracle to go their way. I say easily. They would need a miracle to go their way in order to make the college football playoff. Kansas State, I think they're right outside the bubble. We'll find out about these 2 teams. I just don't know if Kansas State is mature enough as a defense and consistent enough and dynamic enough on the offense side of the ball. The one problem I have with Kansas State is I feel like they're one-dimensional. If they're not winning by their brand of football, they're not going to win the game. That BYU game really concerned me, but to be fair, BYU is a sneaky team that could easily hop into this college football playoff contendership. I think you're going to see a lot of Big 12 teams in this bubble spot, and to be fair, I could put Iowa State in there, so don't think I just think Iowa State is leaps and bounds better than these 2 teams. I just think Iowa State's the favorite right now, and therefore I would give them the chance to be in that second tier. Illinois has had a good start to the year, and they were on a bye week this past week, so I think they're going very much under the radar. I'm going to give them the same aspect of what Iowa is. I think it's just they need a miracle. I'm not going to say it's not happening, but in a Big Ten that like second tier is just wide open, what seems like. I'm going to give them the chance at least. I'm going to do the same thing for the undefeated Indiana Hoosiers. Let that sink in for a second. Indiana is 5-0, I believe. They're ranked. Betting market loves them. I could put them outside the bubble, and if you're a Hoosier fan and you're upset at me, go ahead, feel free. Maybe I just need to be enlightened, but I think this 3 kind of makes sense for that. Not the Penn State tier of the Big Ten, but like that second tier just below it. And maybe one of these 3 teams ends up in that second tier. Penn State loses some games, and then they find themselves right in that third best team in the Big Ten, which could be good enough to make the college football playoff. LSU, I would put right outside the bubble. I don't think they're in contention to win the SEC at this point, but I think LSU, even though a flawed team, is a team that I would not want to personally face with the passing attack of Garrett Nussmeier and Mason Taylor and Kyron Lacey. And not to mention, they just got a running back, Caden Durham, the freshman. He is now a problem. When was the last time LSU had a good running back? It makes that offense just as dynamic as the offensive line is still pretty good on the outside tackles, even though they had that blunder against South Carolina. The defense just, I don't think, is college football playoff worthy. So I would say outside the bubble. But with their schedule, if they're able to beat Ole Miss and beat Texas A&M, that's a resume worthy enough to be in the college football playoff. I just think it's a wait and see for them at this point. But outside the bubble is respectable for them. It's not happening for Michigan. This one is kind of personal for me. I just don't think Michigan is a college football playoff worthy team. I don't think this team is ready. I don't think that they're mature enough on the offense side of the ball. Donovan Edwards has been disappointing. Their only weapon is Colson Loveland at this point. Khalil Mullings is a really good running back. The defense is okay, but like, it's just not happening this year. They're not a college football playoff contender. Miami, they're still a contender. You could flip-flop these two. I think they're stronger than a lot of the Big 12 contenders. I think this is about 50-50, but to be fair, if this team loses, then the other one would probably get in. I think both of them have a pretty good chance of making it as long as they continue their momentum. Miami doesn't finally drop one. Clemson continues to look strong, and if it's a close game in the ACC, I think it would be very difficult to have both of them not in the 12-team playoff. One would get an at-large bid, and then the other one would just probably be a top 4 seed. BYU, right in that outside the bubble spot, right in the thick of the Big 12. Who would have thought? Not me. I thought a lot of the transfers that they brought in didn't really impress me. And BYU fans, even though there wasn't a lot of them, let me hear it in my Big 12 tier list and told me you are sleeping on BYU. I thought the NFL talent that left the room, they weren't bringing up enough. And they've looked really good. They have an impressive win against Kansas State, and they continue to win football games, which is just so important. I'm going to put Mizzou and need a miracle tier. I just think the flaws with this team are too bad. They have a manageable schedule for the rest of the year, but now they're walking a tightrope. And for a program and a team that I just don't think is ready to be able to walk that tightrope and get the job done. And when you're on that super fine line of your schedule for the rest of the year, I think it's a miracle. I think they would have to probably beat Alabama. They just need a signature win, and they don't have that. And potentially Texas A&M was going to be that for them, especially knowing that was in Kyle Field. And you would probably have to win out, and maybe like you get one, good loss, which just feels gross. Like they could end the year 10-2 and be in this conversation. I don't think they end up doing that. I think this team, their flaws on the offensive line, their defense is just not good enough. Brady Cook is just not good enough. Yes, it's Luther Bird and Theo Weiss. Like, they have good running backs. It's a good team. I don't think it's a great team. And so I don't think Missouri deserves to be outside the bubble. Ohio State's national title contender. If you really want to try to argue with me on it, I guess. Ohio State has the best roster, arguably. They looked really good against Iowa. Jeremiah Smith looks really good. I think their pressure test is this week against Oregon. I personally think they should dominate Oregon. I would be very curious to see an argument against it. I just think that this Ohio State team is really damn good. They're deep. They're built for the late season. They're built for long sustaining drives, which I think is the big crutch of a national championship team. There's NFL talent at every single level. Josh Simmons, their tackle transfer from San Diego State, looks incredible. I don't have to really explain this one. Notre Dame, they're in the contender spot as an at-large bid, even with the loss to NIU. Hear me out. Their schedule's super manageable, and they keep winning games. The win against Louisville, and then not to mention, as Texas A&M gets better, their win against them looks better and better as time progresses. Even with the loss to NIU, and their entire basis of making the college football playoff is their resume. So I'm being very clear. They could still be taken out because of that NIU loss, but that win against Louisville was massive. I do not want to understate. That was huge for them, and Texas A&M continues to get better as time progresses. They will get a definite look And I think even you could put them outside the bubble at this point. They're a contender. They're right outside the top 10, and they have a manageable schedule as time goes forward. For USC, I mean, no disrespect, I just don't think it's going to happen this year. I'm going to say need a miracle. I just think their transformation on the defense side of the ball is going to have to take multiple years, multiple seasons. We saw what happened with LSU. They looked really good. They looked like they could match up with Michigan just enough. Michigan obviously got the job done. The loss to Minnesota, I just think as the season progresses, their physicality is going to dwindle as time goes on, just because that's just what happens when you get to a finesse team that's trying to become more physical. A year transformation is almost unheard of. It is done for maybe a couple of games, but as the weather gets colder and as the season gets longer, the injuries start to sustain longer and longer. It'd be really tough for me to imagine USC makes the college football playoff. Oklahoma, I just don't think it's happening this year unless they beat Texas. I just don't think their schedule allows for any breaks. I think Oklahoma is potentially a year away. I think they could be 2 years away. I thought maybe Jackson Arnold would have a better year up to this point. I love Hawkins Jr. a lot. I think their defense is really good, but I just don't think that offensive line is going to even give them an opportunity to even need a miracle. I just don't think it happens this year. I don't think their schedule is manageable enough. I don't think that this team is ready enough. Now, if they go out and beat Texas, I'm going to be hyped, but I just don't think this is the year for Oklahoma to make the college football playoff. SMU, I'd say they're on the bubble, man. They have bounced back, and their losses have looked better as time progressed, and they continue to feel like a team that is becoming more and more cohesive as time progresses. There was a lot of talk that they're not going to be ready for the Power Four. I'm looking at you, CFB Budge, if you're somehow watching this video. They're not going to be ready. They're going to still miss a bowl game, and they continue to look better and better as time progresses. A huge win against Louisville. Now, maybe Louisville is just not as good as we think. Notre Dame beat them. SMU beat them. Like, I have to give them credit at some point. And with that ACC, that third spot is a prime spot to be in. If you're not like a high-level talent team, that third spot could be so dangerous for the rest of the conference because you never know. Say the ACC progresses and Clemson gets a loss or Miami gets 2 losses and you sneak into that title game, you're giving yourself a huge opportunity to be really competitive, and that could be enough to make it into the college football playoff. I think at most the ACC gets 2 teams. If you're really competitive in that ACC title game, that might be enough for you to make it in, even potentially with 3 losses, but that would be a very difficult conversation to have. Texas, simply national title contender. I had Tennessee as a national title contender going into this week. I think they're a college football playoff contender. I think I don't want to be a guy that flip-flops. I think that maybe the offense isn't as cohesive as I thought it would be. Some of their play calling was really, I hate saying that, by the way. I hate saying, I think their play calling could have been better. I just think it wasn't good. I mean, some of the decision-making playing for 4th down and then you get a flag. I just don't think they're as polished as they need to be a national title contender. We're going to find out about them very quickly. So maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion and I shouldn't flip-flop on my take that I think that they're a national title contender, but they're definitely a college football playoff contender. I think in that tier 2, they've definitely elevated to be in that conversation. I just don't think out of the 3 teams in the SEC, they would be probably comfortably number 4 for me. Pitt, I think they're right outside the bubble, man. I think they're right outside the bubble. Pitt's been really fun with Eli Holstein, the former, I believe, Alabama commit. I know about Eli just primarily because he was in Texas A&M recruitment. Eli's been balling out. Pitt's been playing really good. Their schedule's manageable. I think that this is a team that could potentially find themselves. Apologies, I'm looking up at the screen. We have some crazy NFL action going on. I promise I'm paying attention. But Pitt's been balling. I think Pitt's a team that might even get their own video. They need some love, man. If you are a Pittsburgh Panther, man, show some love. I feel so bad if I'm wrong on their mascot. I'm Googling it right now. I'm going to be so mad. They're a Panther. Okay. I was so scared there for a second that I would get their mascot wrong. But no, Pitt deserves all the love. I feel like if I find any Hoosier fans that end up watching this video, they're going to be mad that Indiana's not outside the bubble as I keep watching this. But we got a couple more teams to go through. Oregon, I think they're a college football playoff contender. I bumped them down from national title contender primarily. Just don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to find out this weekend with Ohio State. I think they're a talented team. They just might be a year away than we realize. Texas A&M, I think they're right outside the bubble. I think we're going to find out a lot about the Aggies when they go play LSU in 2 weeks. One of the big things is someone that has talked about Texas A&M a lot on this channel. I gotta see if this is a team that once the spotlight is on them and once the conversations start of, oh, this team, they could be in the college football playoff race. Oh, the lights are getting brighter. How will they respond? I've seen it time and time again with Texas A&M that once the spotlight gets on them, they lose to a Mississippi State. They lose to an Auburn. And with the craziness of this season, I don't want to be too forward to say they're a college football playoff contender. I would still have Tennessee better than them. And then we'll see if LSU is better than them. So I got to give them, at least a little bit of grace. They've definitely elevated. Their schedule is super manageable. We're looking at potentially playing Texas, and they're like A&M's 11-1. Maybe Texas is undefeated or with one loss. They have to play Oklahoma and Georgia back to back these upcoming weeks. So this could get very interesting for Texas A&M, and it was an impressive win for them to go and beat Missouri at home in the fashion that they did it. Don't try to hit me with, oh, Missouri didn't deserve to be top 10 anyways. That's a bozo take. Nice revisionist history, as if a bunch of people weren't picking Missouri either. So I think Texas A&M is right outside the bubble, but they're teetering on that contendership. That's not to say any of these teams aren't contenders to make the college football playoff, but I think that there is a sizable difference between the two outside of maybe Iowa State. Penn State's right in the thick of it. Even though I don't think they deserve to be that good of a team, they're just a team that's going to continually get wins. I don't think they should be the number 4 team in the nation. I think that's just by default, and they're primed to probably go 10-2, have just a good enough resume in the Big Ten to make the college football playoff. That's just what Penn State is. Nebraska, I just don't think it happens this year. They might need a miracle, but I think they may just be a year away. It's been an impressive year to begin with, and I think Matt Rule has this team progressing in a way that is hopeful. But I think Nebraska it's just not going to happen this year with all the context of all the other teams. Ole Miss is still a college football playoff contender. I think with the loss that Alabama sustained against Vanderbilt, they have a second breath of air at this point of a team that definitely could be in that contention to still make the college football playoff. They play LSU this week. I think that's going to be an incredibly interesting matchup. I think between Ole Miss and LSU, whoever wins is going to be setting themselves up for a massive college football playoff push. LSU, if they win, then they go beat Texas A&M. It really doesn't matter what happens with Alabama, because I think even a 10-2 team, even if they're not even in the SEC title game, they're going to be in the contention for the college football playoff. LSU could be primed for that position. Texas A&M could beat an LSU team that just beat Ole Miss, and that launches and bolsters their resume. Ole Miss, they need a marquee win. They dominated South Carolina last week after their embarrassing loss to Kentucky. They are so due for that statement Lane Kiffin win. They got a win last year against LSU in a shocker, or not really a shocker, a masterclass of a football game in general. There's so many things to talk about. I'm going to give Ole Miss a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I still think they're a good team. I think they definitely got a second breath once Alabama lost. UNLV, they're right in the thick of it, guys. They are right in the thick of it. Right there, I'm going to put them right next to Boise State, because we'll find out. Whoever wins it between these two teams is probably, like if UNLV loses, they would need a miracle. It's just how it is for the group of 5. Utah, I would say right outside the bubble. I can't definitively put them in the college football playoff contenders just because I don't know what their quarterback situation is. And does anyone? There's not an ounce of news that gets out of Utah at this point about Cam Rising and who their quarterback is. There's too many variables for me to consider. There's still a really good Big 12 team that needs to be talked about, but I can't confidently put them in the contenders. Texas Tech, secretly, I believe they're 5-1. I just want to confirm that because not a lot of people are talking about Texas Tech. They're number one in the Big 12. With that in mind, they got to be right outside the bubble with all the other Big 12 teams. Texas Tech has played really good football. Their one loss is not in conference, to my understanding. If I can find it really quickly and talk this out with you guys. Who was their one loss to? Oh, Washington State, who could put up a ton of points, but it's a non-conference loss, so therefore they're right in the thick of it. Syracuse, I would think, needs in the ACC. Nah, it's just not happening. I'm gonna put right outside the bubble Army Navy. We are setting ourselves up for an Army Navy fight for the college football playoff. They're both undefeated. We could get an Army Navy AAC championship game and then a Army Navy game following it. I'm just going to put them up there. If you did not know about that, you need to be aware about it because it's an insane outcome that could come from this game. Just need to point that out. Then we have Liberty, who will probably go 12-0. I'm putting them outside the bubble. Now, hear me out. They will probably go undefeated this year, but their one major opportunity against a team, they don't play a Power 4 program this entire year. And the best of the group of 5 teams that they play was going to be Appalachian State, but due to the hurricane, they canceled it. That's not being rescheduled. I just don't think Liberty, it would be unfair to so many other teams if they were to go undefeated on the schedule and the context that they have, that other teams, say a Boise State who beats a UNLV, almost beat an Oregon, comes out 11-1, and Liberty gets in just because of the notion that they're undefeated. I think that is unfair, and it's something that I'll argue to this day. But with that being said, and by the way, it's different than the Florida State thing. Completely different. I was on the Florida State side of things. I will argue about that too. But with that being said, I know this was a super long video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to let y'all guys go.